Back at it. What's up? So today I was having a casual conversation with a few coworkers. We were all talking, having a chat, and we're discussing was an incident that had happened with one of my coworkers. And long story short, she had gotten to a fight. It brought about some sort of discussions about our environments. She said somewhere along the lines, I come from a hostile environment, and it just made me think for a minute. Like, it's an interesting statement. I wonder if I could evaluate it further. What I came up with was that, our environments, whether we know it or not, they have a big effect on how we are, how we act, how we think, our reactions, our patience, etc., etc. There are two different environments, essentially. So there's the internal environment and there's the external environment. And in the internal environment, that consists of our mental, our emotional, and our spiritual environments. The external, that consists of our home / neighborhood, our school and workplaces, and our social environments, which, that can include clubs, friends' houses, vacations, whatever. The thing about the environment is that which sets the precedent is your home environment. If you come from a very understanding, caring, considerate type of household, you're more likely to carry out that type of expression in your own world, as is true for the inverse, which states that if you come from a hostile environment or a not loving environment or an environment which is inconsiderate, drunk, broken homes, all of those things, they do also carry the same tinge, if you will. Essentially, the home, it sometimes sets the precedent on how one will conduct themselves in other environments. The following factors involved, they determine how influential the environment will be. Those factors include time that you spend in your environment, which is why in stages of our lives we could see the home is number one most of the time of our lives until we get into our school, college, work years. The home is the most important place where we get our main environmental norms from. Whatever the climate was in that environment, that's what you're going to absorb. A lot of times you could see in schools, kids who act out, they might be in an environment where they don't have attention, or there's not love, or it's constant conflict. So all the child knows how to do is express that conflict, express that chaos or that disorder, because that's the type of environment that the child comes from. And it's not to say that it's someone's fault or it's, I don't want to say right or wrong, but it's not anyone's fault. It's just due to lack of understanding of how the climate changes and how the environmental climate has an effect on children. Children become big children, which become bigger children, which become adults or big children. Now I say that because a lot of times, more often than not, we are just reproductions of our younger selves. So if you spent a lot of time in a toxic environment, the chances are you're going to be very likely to repeat that later on. If you spent a lot of time in a good, considerate environment, it's very likely that you're going to reproduce those in another time. The second factor involved in determining how influential the environment will be is your personal resistance or vulnerability to the environment. So let's say as a child, you have the ability to resist your environment. If it's a very toxic environment, you're able to use your mind in order to block it out or go into an escape place where, it could be drawing, movies, sports, it could be whatever it is that you use as an escape mechanism in order to offset that toxic environment. Likewise, the other way around, if you do not have the resistance in order to combat your toxic environment, you'll be more vulnerable to the environment. So if there's a lot of toxicity or a lot of hostility or aggression in those environments, and you're very vulnerable, it's going to affect you more than it will if you're less vulnerable or more resistant to that environment. So that is the second thing that affects your environment. And the last thing is, of course, the climate or the temperature of the environment. So now we can use the thermometer. We have cold here on the bottom and we have hot here at the top. The hot temperature is going to represent the more toxic, the more negative environments. And the cool temperature is going to represent more suitable environments, more understanding. Let's just say in a toxic environment or in an aggressive environment, you're more likely going to go up here. In a loving environment, it's going to go down here. In a considerate environment, it's going to go here. Since there's no perfect environment, it could also be said that generally there is one dominant type of climate in the environment that you're usually in. And that would be the climate that you generally take on. More hostile environments, you might be able to offset it but it's also likely that you're going to have some residual effects of that type of hostile environment with you. That's the balance in the universe. There's no such thing as a perfect environment. There's no such thing as a perfect person. There's no such thing as a person without trauma or without any type of issue or complex. Once you start to learn the truth and how things you do have an effect on your environment, have an effect on your children, it's a continual cycle. Once you have an understanding of a piece or part of the truth that could help change your environment, that's what you're going to do to make steps towards that. And because after your home environment, things that take over are usually school and the workplace. Those two things sometimes, they're a substitute now for your home environment. I'm going to give you an example. If I was brought up in a loving household, right? And then I go to school, how I'm going to act in my school environment is probably going to be loving. Just to touch on a point, the internal environment always supersedes the external environment. Now, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual environments come first. Being in your household, now if you have the ability and the understanding of how to manipulate your environment using your mental, your emotional, and spiritual faculties, then you will be able to somewhat offset that climate that's not so nice in your home or your neighborhood. There's always complexes, like I said. You can have a very loving household and be in a very hostile neighborhood. But being in that environment or being in that neighborhood is also going to have some sort of residual effects on you. Yeah, in my house, we were loving, but I know when I got outside, I had to change a little bit because the streets were not loving. They were violent. You could get robbed. I had to always be aware and be on guard. You always pick up things from your environment. Even though these things seem like they're not connected, all of these environments are interconnected, and the most important factor is strengthening internal environment. In a lot of entertainment fields or people who've been successful, a lot of them have come from negative backgrounds or negative environments, negative climates. They found a way to rise above these climates in order to get to success. Likewise, the inverse. When you're in those negative environments, some people cannot rise above them. Some people need to be in positive environments in order for them to be successful. There is no one-size-fits-all remedy for the situation. No two people were raised the same way, and no two people have the same perception of how they were raised in their lives. This is a little quick video on environments and how the environmental climate has the ability to change how you see things and how you experience things after you get out of those environments. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and if you got any comments, leave them right there in the drop box below. I'll see you till next time.